Hey, welcome back to the Hand Toolery. I'm Andrew Malacy. Today I'm going to be flattening and, well, just generally truing up my workbench. So, hope you enjoy. My workbench is actually quite good. It really hasn't shifted that much since I built it nearly 3 years ago. If you can see here, that's pretty much flat. And anything that's not flat about it has really been the result of when I first did it. But if you move over here, you can see that there's a gap right here, and it's from here to here. Basically, it's this end on this half of the bench, and it gets down to maybe 1/8 of an inch right here in the middle. And that is, whenever I built it, I had it all sort of cockeyed, and I just was in a hurry to get it glued up. The actual error transfers over here. All the way at the end of the bench, we've got a big gap here. And that's been there most of the time that I've had this bench. Maybe, again, since the very beginning of it. Another issue is when in my haste to build the bench, I didn't make this perfectly square across it, or I didn't make it perfectly, square to the top. So if you put a square against this, you can see obviously it's the width or it's the thickness of the leather here, but then it just starts getting further out. So it actually needs to cant in like that. And that's of course because of the top. So I think whenever I flatten the top, it will fix that, but we shall see. So I'm gonna start by flattening the top. Lastly, because I built this bench without any sort of real workbench, I had a workbench over there, but it just wasn't working for what I needed to do. I have these little filler strips here that you can maybe see are just put in there. They hide it really well, but there's like a good gap there. And that's because the middle, again, sunk down and caused it to rise up. So what I'm gonna actually have to do is flatten the top and then flatten the bottom in that one area. I'm gonna actually trace along the stretchers here, the rails or whatever, and then just flatten it on that area. So again, the 3 areas, I gotta flatten this, I gotta flatten underneath, then I've gotta also make sure it's square right here. I've never actually deconstructed this bench at all in any form since I constructed it. And it's interesting to note, like this little pin, which is just a washer that I broke apart and cinched around it. This washer is wearing a little bit, but not much. You can see it eating through. You see the different color on the edge there. This one, of course, is fine. This is what's interesting. Look at the wear on that. Can you see the different colors? And you can also see the lip right there. So now you get a better idea of the design. This is just a pin. This is just a pin, and that goes on it and rides in that groove. And that's how it cinches up. Here's the sliding dead man. This is great. This has zero wear on it really at all. In fact, it's nice and burnished. Still working great though. Wow, that's heavy. Woo, that is heavy. That, my friends, is a Roubo benchtop. I keep saying 3 years ago, but I signed it in 2017. I know I made this early 2017, and then a couple months later, I started my YouTube channel in the middle of 2017. So it's actually a 4-year-old bench. It really hasn't changed that much since, in terms of movement, since I made it 4 years ago. These were problems that more or less were built into the bench. So that's inexperience and doing what you can with what you have. So the reason why I'm flattening it is basically because it needs to be, but also I've noticed more and more that I want to have a rather flat surface. Like whenever you're truing up and leveling a piece, for example, like a desk, I want to be able to know that the benchtop is close to flat. But now I just know that it has a gap in the middle or a depression in the middle, and I always have to account for that, which is annoying. So whatever the case is, I'm gonna try and fix it. Here you can clearly see, like I said, the error built in where it's high here and low on the bottom, of course, on the other side. But watch this. I think I just need to get this flat in the middle and not the whole way across. And then I'll check for square more or less from this front edge here. It pains me to do this, but I'm gonna start by ripping off this leather. I've got just maybe a little tiny bit of a hump there. I gouged out my bench top with the circular saw a couple years back. So I'm glad to maybe reduce that now. And there it is. That's how much I took off in the end to get the whole bench nice and flat. That's 5, 6, almost 3/8 came off down in the front. So that was significant. The bench top is still 4 inches, thereabouts. Actually, it's 4 1/16. The other thing I did while you saw me planing the leg was because this front leg was canted out a little bit, and so it created a little bit of an angle like that, an obtuse angle. So I actually shaved down the front. I had to take off quite a bit, and then I had to redo a little bit of the mortise here in the leg. I had to deepen this mortise a little bit down here, but in the end, everything comes up and meets quite nicely. If I lay a square across here now, I get really close to square. So I've never really had a really square and flat bench because I rushed it at the end, you know. That's a lesson for everybody out there. Now it's really flat, maybe 95% flat. There's a little bit of dipping on the ends, just, you know, because of whatever. And this is really nice and square now. The action on this is just as smooth as it was, maybe a little smoother, because I really did put time into making sure this is all good. Well, that's it. It was really an ordeal. I decided to fix all the issues that I could on this because when I made it, I didn't put a whole lot of time into making it really great in terms of square and all that stuff, and flat, obviously. Like I showed you, there was along the depth of it, from the front to the back, there was a hollow or a dip, and it's not because it warped. I'm pretty sure I remember building that in just because whenever I had set in the end block on the end here, I didn't put it perfectly, so they were kind of like this. And I had to fix that. So in the end, I took off, something like that much, like 1/4 inch to almost 3/8 of an inch. And I had to come down mostly from the sides. It was a real chore. I have a huge pile of shavings. And then also the leg vise itself, the front leg was canted out a little bit. And so I had to actually remove a whole lot of that. I don't know, maybe that much, another 3/8 to get it to be perfectly vertical. And then that meant I had to redo the mortise on the X vise, the crisscross vise, which honestly, after I did that, and since I've got the experience of having done it the first time, it was like 15-20 minutes. And now actually the leg vise works better than before. Less friction, less things impeding it. This here, this wagon vise over at the end, it's working better than ever. I don't know why, but it's so smooth. But as you can see, it's really flat. There are a couple low spots, like at the very end over there and over here, where I maybe was pushing my plane over and down, but that's it. It goes right over the top there, over the vise. It doesn't really, as you can see, it's not pivoting on the middle or on a high spot. I put the center tool holder just below the depth. So that's sometimes that used to get in my way because it was just slightly above. I should have always fixed it. I should have fixed it, but I never did in 4 years. But now I did. I guess the big lesson here is when you build your workbench, you can get lots of work done if you just get a workbench like I did, and it has a lot of things wrong with it as far as the way it was imperfect, many imperfections as I made it. But if you take your time the first time, I think everything's just going to stay in place. I don't think the top really has moved that much. For the finish, after sort of getting it, I smooth planed it a little bit, but there are still some plane tracks, which is I'm really not worried about. After smooth planing it a little bit to take down the final little high spots, I actually went over with 120 grit, and then I did one coat of white bond poly, but a nice thick coat, and then a really thick coat of Johnson's paste wax. So I can feel the texture. It doesn't really have much sheen at all, which is great. I can feel it. It's much less smooth than it used to be. But at the same time, I'm pretty confident glue's not going to stick to it. So I'm happy about that. Last thing I did is I gave it a once-over cleaning. I removed all the shelf boards underneath, which you would have seen. I had never done that before, and it's nice to know that they're holding up great. But yeah, I guess takeaways on this. I'm not sure if I were to build this again, I'm not sure if I would keep the tool divider. It's nice to have, I guess, right there, but a lot of times it gets in my way. So I don't know. I don't think it's a deal breaker if you don't have one. I don't think it's like a lifesaver if you do. What I will say, this budget workbench, 4 years on, any problems I've had with it have been my own doing. And yeah, like I said, I don't know what the price of lumber is at this time, but when I bought all this stuff, I was less than $300 out the door for everything, including the hardware. So it's a pretty cheap bench build. And as you can see, I made over 100 videos, a lot of projects. I've made my sideboard. I really don't have anything I would recommend to this. At this point, I would say it's just different versions of really nice. One of the reasons why I spent so much time on this, getting this flat, getting this trued up over on the leg vise, is because I wanted to be able to stick a square on here and have it be close to square, which now it is. So that was one of my main goals, was to square this up, because sometimes when I'm planing an edge, in particular edges, long edges as well, where this board used to be a little bit tipped this way towards you, and what that meant is that I would always be like trying to compensate my body to square it up. And so if I just follow like that, you think it would just naturally follow, but I suspect in a long time now that the bench itself is causing me to not be able to edge joint very well. We'll see if this helps. I don't really notice the difference looking down on it right now, but we'll see. Well, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed as much as you can watching me clean and true my bench here. Remember, I actually have plans for this bench. They're really cheap. They're 10 bucks. There's 50 something pages worth of step-by-step instructions. I've sold quite a few of them on my Etsy page, which I'm linking to right here, right now. But if you're interested in building your own version of this, which, like I've just shown you, it works great and you can do so on a relatively small budget, then yeah, for 10 bucks you can get my plans. So anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you around for the next one.